Welcome to the Wisdom of Women show. Business is the most powerful, innovative force in the world. And with visionary women leaders at the helm, we can lead in both impact and profit. Today's world needs the wisdom of women in business. This is why we are here to help women grow. Are you already a successful visionary woman founder leading a high impact company? The Wisdom of Women show is designed just for you. We are a community of women founders, investors, and leaders who want to see you rise. Join us as we unlock opportunities and prosperity for women-led enterprises. The future of business is women. Are you ready? Welcome to the Wisdom of Women show. We are dedicated to amplifying the voices of women in business. A new model of leadership is emerging, and we are here to amplify the voices of women leading the way. I am your host, Coco Sellman, five-time founder, impact investor, and creator of the Force for Good system. Thank you for joining us today as we illuminate the path for unlocking opportunities and prosperity for women-led enterprises. The voice and wisdom of women is needed. And today we have a deeply people-centered guest with us. Jennifer Yates is the founder and CEO of Roux, R-O-U-X. That's right, Roux, like what you would make before you make a delicious sauce or a gravy. Roux is a company dedicated to providing restorative and human-first business operations. With a career spanning 4 entrepreneurial ventures, Jennifer has honed a unique people-centered approach to operations, focusing on bringing cohesion, adaptability, and human connection to every project. Her background is as eclectic and as robust, from driving tractors on rice farms to serving as a VP of business operations and teaching as a university lecturer. Known for her rebelliously kind leadership, Jennifer excels in change management by empowering team members to become self-sufficient, engaged, and aligned with company goals. Think about how valuable that would be. Imagine your whole team self-sufficient, engaged, and aligned with company goals. Roux's mission reflects Jennifer's belief in connection, community, and truly human-centric growth for companies of substance and scale. So happy to have you here, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Coco, for inviting me on. We met, we bonded, and I'm just so glad to be here, seeing you face to face and having a lovely conversation. So thank you.
Yes, we got to meet at the Entreprenista Founders Weekend in Orlando in April. It was such a fun experience, right? I mean, such a wonderful group.
It really was. It was fabulous, and it was actually beyond my dreams. I thought I was just going to, like hang out. And I learned a ton. It was packed with hundreds of really brilliant business women. Yes. You and I were seated together at the same table. We had never met before. Yes. And it was just a wonderful weekend. It was inspiring and optimistic and just, and educational too. I loved it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And it was fun. Fun. And I think, as we talk about, we'll get into this in a minute, but we talk about things being people-centered and what creates actual connection and growth. Fun is one of those things that sometimes gets forgotten. And boy, when there's a little connection and fun, everything changes.
100%. I mean, fun and Food is a connector too. We're probably that'll come up, but that's one of the ways I connect with people
Yeah.
is hear what they're eating. I love it.
Totally, totally. So before we go deeper on the people-centered piece, I'd just love to hear what is one book written by a woman that has significantly influenced your life?
Okay, so I actually have two because I
Awesome.
couldn't decide.
Awesome.
So one is a very popular book. It's Glennon Doyle's Untamed. I'm sure that's come up before, but there are two quotes in that book that just stopped me in my tracks. I read this book right before I started my business, and I knew I was doing the right thing. So Glennon Doyle's Untamed, quote number one: I am a human being meant to be in perpetual becoming.
Oh,
If I am living bravely, my entire life will be a million deaths and rebirths.
mm,
That's quote number one.
beautiful.
So basically it's saying you are going to change and evolve constantly, and that
Mhm,
is okay. Embrace it.
mhm.
The other quote from that book was revelation must come before revolution.
Oh,
And so I was out walking my dogs. I was listening to this book and I was out walking my dogs when that second quote came up in the book. I stopped in my tracks because I had realized something about myself, which was I want to have a one to many effect on business.
yes,
And so that
yes.
revelation came before my revolution
Yeah.
of leaving, full time employment to go out on my own. So that book, there was one other aspect of that book that was really, really helpful to me, and it's a trick I use to this day. So Glennon Doyle was going through a decision, basically,
Uh-huh.
and she sat with herself in her body and closed her eyes
Mhm,
and imagined what she would do if she had said yes to this decision and what
mhm,
what it would look like if she said no.
mhm.
And she listened to her body's way of reacting to each of those answers. So if she said yes, what did her body do? And if she said no, what did her body do? I use that tactic every time I make a big decision. I close my eyes and I imagine myself in the situation, whatever answer it is. And I remember distinctly the first time I used it was when I was considering taking on a certain client.
Mhm,
And I was having my doubts about this client. So I sat and I closed my eyes and I said, okay, what does this feel like if I say yes?
mhm.
And I got nauseated.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
body told me what the answer was. So
Right.
I got those three things from that book. And I loved it. It really helped me when I was starting my business and is something I lean on even to this day. The
Yeah.
second book is by a smaller, lesser known author, Amanda Crowell, Dr. Amanda Crowell. I'm going to hold up the book. It's called Great Work, and the subtitle is Do What Matters Most Without Sacrificing Everything Else.
Mm.
That book helped me in the last year because, as you probably know, and as many business founders and leaders know, you think you're going to do one thing And then you start, maybe you pivot or you start going down a different path for whatever reason, and you start to confuse yourself. Am I doing what I really want to be doing, what I should be doing? All of that stuff. All of us go through it. And
Totally.
I started to feel an existential crisis. Like, am I doing what I should be doing?
Mhm.
I just wasn't sure. And so I heard that author on a podcast, immediately ran out and got the book, started reading through the book. And what she recommends that you do is kind of rewind back to your childhood.
Mhm.
What were you passionate about in your childhood? What were some themes that stick with you from your childhood? And is there a thread between your childhood activities and passions to today? And when
Yes.
I thought back, sure enough, there were threads
Mhm.
from my childhood to today, and I realized I am doing what I should be doing.
Mhm.
So it was a really helpful book for me.
I love that. So you've given us two real pearls here. You've given us Untamed by Glennon Doyle and great work by Dr. Amanda Powell. And what I in both of these examples and the stories that did I say it the wrong way? Oh,
Yeah, Crowell.
Powell. Okay, thank you. And the thing that I love about your examples and the stories that you put around them is this part of what we're featuring here on the show is the wisdom of women and how the voice and wisdom of women is really unique and different and needed. And it doesn't have to be just a woman that decides to listen to his or her body to see if it is aligned. It doesn't have to be just a woman who sees that she's not just a series of milestones, but perpetually becoming, right? She doesn't have to be just a woman that sees that intuition, revelation, discovery has to come before revolution. But this is what the wisdom of women and leadership is about. And for us to be able to embody that and bring it into the work that we do, and not being afraid to talk to our teams about how does this make your body feel, it brings the wisdom of women into the forefront of how we live as a society. And I think it's such great work and important. And so you have had this very exciting and rich and textured life. And I think one of the things I really love about connecting with you is how you have this, from punk rock and, rice farming, but you have this very solid center that sort of weaves it all together, kind of like what you're talking about in this book, Great Work. And so I'd love to just get an idea of what led you to create Roux and the story of the name Roux.
Oh, okay. So I am preparing to appear here. Of course, was going back through, my 28 years in corporate life and, my upbringing and everything. And I, I thought to myself, I can't tell the story of 28 years.
No, no, no.
So, how do I condense this down and what are the primary themes in my life? And I boiled it down to I've always been kind of a seer, an
Ah,
evaluator, a surveyor. So I see things in the landscape,
mm,
whatever that landscape is, whether it's truly a landscape, a human landscape, or a business landscape, all of it. I can see patterns
mhm,
in those landscapes. And I can see the relationships between those patterns. and understand why they exist. So the surveyor, evaluator, and seer is kind of encapsulates theme number one. Theme number two is just in my nature, I'm kind of a planner and an optimizer and a visionary. But I will say, I'm also a human dichotomy. I'm very spontaneous and, like I'm not one of those people that's overly planned. So I'm kind of a fluid planner, an optimizer, and visionary. And the other thing that I have always been is a change partner. I'm the kind of person who is able to inspire others and bring them along. So, like, going back to this book, Great Work, I was thinking about my childhood. I was the kid in the neighborhood who wanted to put on plays, and I would recruit all the neighborhood kids, and we would, build a stage in the backyard by stringing blankets across, from tree to tree, bring all the parents in and do some kind of play. Or when I was a cheerleader in high school, I don't know how I did this in rural Louisiana, but I convinced my fellow cheerleaders that we must do skits at every pep rally. They thought I was cuckoo banana pants, but I did. I brought them along and we did these skits. And then the school looked forward to pep rallies with our skits and like giving away a spirit stick and all of this stuff. So I've always been able to lead people through change by bringing them along and making them a part of the change. So it's those three things: the seer, the planner and visionary, and the change agent or change partner. So how I got here is I spent 28 years in corporate with all kinds of titles you can imagine.
Yeah.
From statistician to project manager to product manager to, this and that. And ended up at my last job in corporate as a VP of business operations. That's all interesting, but every client in my past would reach out to me to ask me questions like, well, how do you do this? Can you advise us in that or this or whatever? And so I realized at the end of my corporate or full-time employment stint, there are questions that clients need help answering, and they're coming to me already. Maybe there's something in this. I think I'm going to go out on my own. And as I talked about with the Glennon Doyle book, I had that revelation. Beyond that, there's kind of the appendix to my story, which is I have been a 4-time founder or co-founder. So 20 years ago, I left full-time employment to open my own retail store. I had never done retail before, but I figured it out and had this store. I had both successes and failures in that. When the store closed, because one of the failures was a financial failure, I couldn't keep it open. And I can talk about that later. But from that came the next thing I did, which was co-founding an interactive arts fair that ran twice a year for 7 years. I was in a punk rock band, which was basically
a business.
Yes, it was a business. It was a community. It was saying yes and trying something new. I didn't know. I had played violin in elementary school, but I didn't know how to play electric bass, much less play and sing, much less play, sing, and write music and write lyrics. I did all of that. I learned. So you kind of learn as you go. And I did that for 10 years. It was great fun. And then I also said yes recently to co-found and co-host a podcast about e-commerce. Again, not something I knew much about going in, but my co-host said to me, You bring good energy and you ask really good questions. And I want to do this with you. And I said, sure. I mean, we had known each other or have known each other for 20 years. So it was easy. So outside of like corporate life, I do have a very rich other life that
Yeah.
it feeds all of that. I'm a creative person. I need to exercise that creativity. I'm also a beauty school dropout. I like working with my hands and
Love
doing
it.
things there. If I get the urge to do something, I'm going to explore it and learn about it. I'm an
Yeah.
explorer by nature. I'm
Yeah.
going, yeah, I want to
That's
learn about the landscape.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know, and that makes you such a wonderful partner for founders because you have both experience as a founder and that often missing corporate uh, structure, infrastructure, lessons along, you know, the pedigree of working in companies that have had a long time to figure out how to do things, and whether you decide to do it the same way or you decide to do it differently is up to you, but it gives you that other experience of not just having to create everything all by yourself and knowing how others make it work, right? Other companies do it. And so that corporate experience, I think, is a wonderful background for this creative person that you are. So if you, I mean, I love the story about, you know, just that's on your website, talks about why you named your company Roux.
True. Yes. So I am from rural Louisiana. I grew up on a rice farm. That's the tractors and all of that. And if you have never been to Louisiana, first of all, I suggest going. It is like visiting a different country.
Yes,
Um, and the
wonderful.
food there is incredible and it's important.
Yeah.
And most food in my part of Louisiana, which is the southwest side of the state, is roux based. So
Uh-huh.
a roux is flour and fat, and it's cooked almost to burnt.
Mhm.
So it or usually in Louisiana, but there are different levels of roux. So that's another add-on to the story. So you can cook roux, a light roux that isn't cooked very much creates a different outcome than the roux that's cooked almost to burnt. And that
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
create a different flavor and outcome. What I love about, besides that roux is the start of so many delicious foods,
Yes.
is that it takes ingredients that you already have, very
Yes.
simple ingredients,
Simple.
and builds upon them for something wonderful. So if you
Yes.
think about that in business,
Mhm.
you can start with what you already have and then
Always.
expand and build into something wonderful. The other thing about Roux is it is a structural
Mhm.
foundation, a
Mhm.
thickening agent,
Mhm.
and it provides cohesiveness. So I
Yeah.
wanted to name my company after something that represented exactly what I bring, which is that structure and the cohesiveness and that binding material. I
Mhm.
just happened to use my human centered and human connection and my ability to make those connections to
Mhm.
provide that foundation and the scaffolding for those better outcomes. Also, it is a nod to my upbringing in rural Louisiana to name something Roux. Also, I love the the letter O or circles. I love circles. I always have. I'm wearing circles in my earrings. I have circles tattooed on me. I love
Yeah.
circles. Plus, it's like a little hug. And then I also love X's. I'm Generation X.
Yeah.
It Generation X is the generation that kind of was the first one that bucked the status quo. So it speaks a little bit to my rebel nature. I'm not so rebellious that I'm like off the rails, but I am also not one to think that the way we're doing it now is the right way just because that's the way we've always done it. I'm going to think creatively and try to bring something a little different. So that is how I named my company Roux.
That's beautiful. And it's, I think what's exciting and important for everyone listening is it's great to hear about it for Roux and for you, but it's also a best practice for any company that has a desire to grow with substance and scale. If you can create a meaningful, a whole repertoire of stories, but a meaningful story behind the name of your company, a meaningful story behind the symbols, the circles, the X's in your company. It allows, it's not just because Jennifer likes these things. It's because it creates a mystery. It creates a story. It creates a special sauce that your people can then come together, and it creates structure, right? Connection. So, and I really fully believe, Jennifer, it's things like this, it's these types of elements that allow companies to become great. And companies that start with very little, you don't need anything to be able to connect with your employees, right? You just need to have connection, and you need to have purpose. So you focus on understanding employees' motivations and work styles as key to project success and, company growth. So what are some practical steps leaders can take to foster a people-centric and restorative culture?
Yes. So that is a big question.
It's a big question.
I'm going to answer it in several different ways and several different threads. So, one of the things that, if you want to build a people centric organization, what you're really saying is that you value people. So it
Yes.
becomes one of your values.
Yes.
Now, companies do, many companies have values. And I think many companies actually make the mistake of just writing the values out, putting it in a picture frame on the wall, and telling people these are our values and everyone do it. It is so much more than just the poster of values. So I want to talk through some real tactics that companies can use to live and breathe their values, no matter what they are. But people-centric value, it is one. But this approach goes to any value, and then I'll slide more into the people part. So the first thing that you could do with values is obviously communicate. So that is the poster. Talk about your values. But that is explicit communication. I am telling you my value is human-centered, but I'm not sharing with you the implicit communication, kind of that the human environment interaction of that value. So you have to have signals or unspoken communication of what that means to people. So I'll give you an example recently. I kind of told you a hint of this in the preamble before we started recording, but recently I was at a music festival overseas, and I was sight unseen. Like, I just showed up at this music festival, and I left there thinking, "Oh my gosh, I got their company values. How did I get it?" I didn't see a poster anywhere around the festival that said, "We believe in accessibility. We believe in sustainability. We believe in belonging." But I walked away thinking that. How did I get it? It was the human environment interaction. I picked up on the cues and the signals. So when I entered the area to see a band play, in the back, there was a raised platform with a ramp. That's a cue. There was a porta potty at the bottom of that that was accessible for people perhaps in wheelchairs or any other assisted aid.
Mhm.
There, all of the food vendors had multiple options for every kind of dietary restriction you could think of. All the serving containers were in compostable materials. This Those were the cues. So
Yes.
when I talk about communication, it isn't just explicitly saying, I am human centered. You have
Right.
to
Right.
practice what you're
Right.
preaching and communicate that implicitly
Yeah.
and give your team the cues. This Okay, so that's big giant number one, communication, implicit and explicit. The second thing is provisioning the resources and the tools in support of that value. So you can say, we value mothers at work. Well, you can tell me that, but what are the resources and the tools that you are giving working mothers to show them and everyone else that that's one of your values?
Yes.
I recently heard the CHRO at Etsy speak about the tools they give for parents. Listen to this. They put aside a budget so that when a parent goes on parental leave, a manager can use that budget to A, hire a temporary replacement, or B, pay their own team extra for putting in the extra work while that mother or father or partner is out on leave. Now,
Brilliant.
that is a resource and a tool that
Yeah.
communicates that value. So, provision, resources, and tools. There's a third one that, in my experience, very few companies actually lean into. And I feel like this one is, well, it is. It's just as important as the other three. And I will say, well, I'll tell you about the third one, then I'll summarize at the end. The third one is curating and vetting partnerships that support your values. So if you are
Yes.
working with a client, if you're
Yes.
going to support humans at work, but you're working with a client that is abusive to your
Yes.
workforce in their
Yes.
communications,
Yes.
or don't some other way they don't support your
Yes.
company values, you
Yes.
must say no. That is not a partnership that
Yes.
communicates your values. So you need to carefully curate and vet those partnerships and only sign on with those who are in support of your values.
Mm-hmm.
So, in summary, no one of those prongs, communication, provisioning of resources, communicating and vetting partnerships, can act alone in supporting those values. They're intertwined. So the partnership piece is implicit communication. The resources and tools are implicit communication. Communicating and the way you speak to people on your team is both explicit and implicit. All three of them are interlocked with one another, and one can't operate or communicate your values on its own. That that is like value. That's my
Yes.
value guidebook. Um,
Yes.
So and then I can talk more specifically about the people part if you'd like, but I want to pause and because I can see you chomping at the bit.
Well, I think I love the way you've laid this out for people to think about, because sometimes it's like you say, everybody thinks, well, I have values. They're on my website. They're on the wall. And there's a very big difference between having truly infused your values into your organization and your practices and not. And when you do, it actually creates this tremendous momentum within the organization, and it fosters a loyalty of your customers and your employees, and people will run through walls on behalf of an organization that it feels is aligned with what it does, what it says, and it has true values. Right.
100%. When I think about like a very popular company value besides people is trust.
Mhm.
We trust in our people, we trust in our clients, we trust in our product. How are you practicing that trust?
Right.
And so I think about, for example, Warby Parker is a great example of a company that practices trust.
Yes.
If you order from Warby Parker, try on at home, they are sending you a box of 5 glasses frames, the box to ship them back in, the ability to keep them at home to try on, yourself for over X number of days. No money has changed hands. Warby Parker is telling you, I don't need to charge you money. I trust you,
Yes.
potential customer. You're not even a customer,
Yes.
potential customer. I trust you to do the right thing, which is send these glasses back, by the deadline. When you are trusted to do the right thing, not only do you feel better in general, but that trust then becomes cyclical. You then return the trust back to Warby Parker. They trusted me to do the right thing. I'm trusting them as a brand to do the right thing. And so then it becomes a cycle. So I would love to encourage anyone who's listening and who has a business to think about their company values and how to use that 3-step guidebook, which
Yes.
is a spoken book, to really, really emphasize and live each one of their values. So each of your values, if you have 3 or 5 values, you need to think, how am I communicating it? How am I providing the resources? How am I curating partnerships around each of those?
Yes. And I also encourage to create, to make metrics around your values, right? Because why wouldn't we? We measure everything else that's considered important. So, how do you create measurements around trust or integrity or people-centeredness or employee focus, whatever it is? Like, how do you measure it? And so I fully agree. I also believe that you said 3 to 5. I think with my last business, Illume, I started out with 6, and it's unwieldy. If you cannot remember, and gosh, your team can't remember what your values are, then they don't value them because they can't name them.
That's
So,
right.
right. So like less is really more. Hard to do, right? Because we believe everything, of course you can still have integrity even if it's not one of your core values, right? Like what is it you really need in order
Mm.
to create this particular business and impact in the world? So let me shift the conversation a little bit towards one of the things our listeners are constantly doing is looking for growth. Growth is so much of a piece of how we can do all the things, complete the vision of the business. Is you need to have enough gross profit to hire the best team, to create the best product, to fuel the next level of marketing and sales. So how can this idea of people-centered focus help with growth, right? So many of our founders face bottlenecks, stalled growth. How can you guide clients to identify and resolve these issues through people-centered operations?
I love this question because a company is really only as good as its people. And so business is human, it's connection, and it's community all in one thing. So for me, the path to growth is building fortified teams, resilient teams. And then there's one other thing. So I want to go through the fortified and the resilient teams and what that leads to. So, a fortified team, what does that really, really mean? That means a team is multidisciplinary. It is a team with complementary skills. So, this skill kind of overlaps with the other skill. They're not exactly the same expert, but they have adjacencies. So, your team's multidisciplinary, it's complementary. The team has different strengths, different interests, and different perspectives. And the leader needs to be open to all of those facets of a team and desire to hire those multiple facets of a team. So that's one aspect of building a fortified team. The other one is more tactical. No one person on the team should solely own a set of skills or tasks. So you need to cross-pollinate with knowledge share across people. Now there may be a specialist on the team. A specialist is in charge of this one thing, but there's someone else who kind of knows what that specialist does and is trained a little bit. The third thing, and this is related, is there's knowledge sharing and communication across team members. And I'm going to give an example in a second after I go through the resilient piece. So the first step is a fortified team. I've given tactical ways to build that team, multidisciplinary, different skills, different thoughts, different perspectives. Be open to that. No one person is in charge of one thing. There's knowledge sharing and communication sharing. Again, there's that trust, and the democratization of communication is really important. So people have to feel comfortable speaking out and giving their advice and their expertise. Your team knows. They're working and living in it every single day. Ask them and then be quiet and listen. Okay, so resilient. How do you build a resilient team? A resilient team is working below capacity. Now that is one of those business gotchas because
right?
yeah, you hire someone and you want to max them out and get the maximum utilization you can. But what happens when people are maxed? Yeah. Well, besides burnout, there is no room for innovation. There's no room for experimentation or creativity. There's no room if someone goes on vacation or someone is suddenly out sick or something happens. So you always want your team to be operating below capacity. Make room for creativity, innovation, being nimble. and for something to happen and, someone else to step in. Also, allow for mistakes. How do we learn? You
So
know?
important.
Yeah. So
So
that is
important.
building the resilient part of the team.
Yeah.
Now, I said there's oh,
No,
go
I
ahead.
was just going to say how hard that is, right? When you get to a point and you have a certain amount of cash flow and you have a certain amount of people, you start to feel a little bit like you can tolerate people making mistakes. But when you are like strapped and early and there's no time for mistakes, you start to do everything yourself. And of course, that's the bottleneck. But it is you're talking about here, Jennifer, really big, hard things, right? Hiring people that are different than you, right? With different opinions that operate very differently. You're a self-starter and they're like a plotting analyst. Like that is hard. It is not easy to do this. So I just want to say that because you're talking about this and it's not like we can all just go do it because it's it's so uniquely hard. And what I would encourage everyone listening is to not just nod, I'm doing it. I agree, but see where you're not, because that's where you have the opportunity for revelation, right? And revolution is in these simple concepts that are very hard to implement. So I'm sorry, keep going. You were going to say the last piece, the last
Well,
step.
and the last step kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying. This is hard work.
Yes.
This is the million deaths and the rebirths.
Yes.
And allowing
Yes.
people to make mistakes means everyone is going, I'm not saying let them make a mistake and then just sweep it under the rug. Learn from it
Right.
and evolve past it. And
Yeah.
because that's where the growth
Yes.
happens. So the
Yes.
third thing, and this is the really, really difficult piece for leaders of any kind, whether you're a founder or you're the manager of a team, you need to operate from the mindset that you want to be and are replaceable.
Yes. Yes.
How can you make room for
Yes.
growth on your team if you don't operate from the mindset that you are and want to be replaceable? You
Yes.
want your team to come in and fill in your shoes. If you are a founder, and Coco, you said this in your intro, you're a serial founder.
Mhm.
I have founded and co founded multiple things. Founders are visionaries. You need to make room to move
Yes.
on to the
Yes.
next idea because you're going to have it, the next innovation, the next this or that. And you can't do it if you don't empower your people to fill in where you were once doing everything. So you need to build up your team for your spot.
Mhm.
Then that person is filling in your spot. What about their spot?
Exactly.
And it's a chain reaction. And
Yeah.
pretty soon,
Yeah.
people start filling in the next vacated spot above them. And you want them to be ready for that. So,
So important. It's so important. And it's also when I've gone through the process of exiting, um, the value of your company is nothing if your buyers believe that you are the business, right? You need to make sure that company can operate without you. That's the being able to install a leadership team that can function without you is how you make sure that your company is sustainable, right? And for managers and that type of thing, I've seen more I believe that it happens more with women than with men. I don't have data to support it, but my hunch is this. We get too connected and protective, nurturing what we do and how we do it. And, nurturing our teams and protecting people, that we don't allow ourselves to elevate and allow, and it's a part of what we do, and men do it too, but I think we have a tendency to become so responsible for the work we do that we feel that there's something wrong with us delegating and leaving it on to somebody else.
I think you're making a really interesting point, because I bet there is a gendered kind of approach to whether you feel like you can operate from a replaceable point of view. So what you're saying is women, they want to nurture and help and be
Yep.
there and support.
Yep.
But sometimes, you have to let the others leave the nest.
Yeah.
I have encountered men who are approaching it from a different point of and a different rationale, and whether it doesn't even, we don't have to talk about it, but I do think for a woman, part of nurturing, if you
Yeah.
think about what the kind of
The
teacher
teenagers,
model,
right?
well, teenagers, and the teacher model. The teacher model is I do, we do, you
You
do.
do.
So I can do it at first, then we do it together. You learn about it,
Mhm.
and then you do. You're empowered to do this thing, and there's a trust. So if you as a woman, not you, the collective as a woman, feel this responsibility to nurture and care for your team, the best thing you can do is you do.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yes. Yes.
operate.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Empower others.
Yes. It's
Don't cover
beautiful.
them up. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jen, you've just given us a whole master class on culture and people and how to create a resilient and growth-oriented organization. We're all going to need to go back and read the transcript over and over again and follow it. It is a really rich playbook that you have offered to us here today. Thank you for your wisdom. So
Thank you.
how can our viewers and listeners learn more about you and your services? How can they get more connection with you?
I'm going to give you 4 places. So I play a lot on LinkedIn. I share this kind of wisdom there on the regular. So my LinkedIn profile is Jennifer A. Yates, and you can find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. The second place is my website, which is workwithroux.com. It's all one word, Work with Roux. And on the top of my website and at the bottom, there's a button. You can book a call. It's free. I love meeting people. I want to hear your story. I want to share some more wisdom with you on a call. Come on, book a call. The third place is, they're kind of number 3 and number 4 is, if you want to learn more about the way I think and use this kind of information, I have a more long form blog called The Gravy. It's thegravy.substack.com. And I have a shorter form newsletter, Drippings, which is at roux.kit.com. So any of those 4 places, you can get my wisdom, get my little nuggets of information, or if you want to meet me, I would love to meet you. Book a call.
That is wonderful and so generous. All these different ways that you're feeding your experience and wisdom into the community. That's wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today on the Wisdom of Women show. Thank you for illuminating the path to unlocking opportunities for growth and prosperity for women-led enterprises everywhere. We value your experience, your wisdom, and you. The
Thank you.
world. You're well. Yes. It's been so
Thank you
fun to
so
have you.
much.
The world is made better by women-led business. Let's all go make the world a better place. Cheers. Is your business ready to accelerate? Take the Business Acceleration Readiness Assessment today and find out now at www.aforceforgood.biz/quiz. Take the 5-minute assessment and you will receive an instant response on the 4 essential areas of alignment needed for business growth. You will also receive 4 free tools specific to your situation to help you and your team accelerate success right away. Go to www.aforceforgood.biz/quiz and find out what you can do to accelerate, impact, scale, and profit today.